The crash echoed like a gunshot in the empty hallway. Claire Densley flinched, dropping the dusty stack of old textbooks she was carrying. The sound reverberated off the tiled floors and faded painted lockers of Brookstone High, breaking the eerie silence that always hung heavy in schools during summer. She turned. 30 feet down the hall, locker number 319 had slumped forward and split open at the base, like it had simply given up after standing for nearly half a century. "Jesus," she whispered, brushing chalk dust off her jeans. Claire wasn't supposed to be in this wing. Principal Harrow had said the West Hall was off-limits during renovations, but her curiosity had always been stronger than her obedience. And besides, this wing wasn't under construction yet, just neglect. No one had been down here in decades, not really. She walked toward the fallen locker boots, echoing with each step. One door had popped completely free, the other hung by a single hinge. Inside was the usual mess: old paperbacks, a stained gym towel, a cracked protractor, but something metallic caught her eye. Tucked against the back corner, hidden beneath layers of grime and curled notebook paper, was a key ring, a large brass loop with at least a dozen iron keys attached. Most were worn smooth, tagged with faded numbers or illegible labels, but one stood out. It was slightly larger than the others, with a small crescent moon carved into its handle. Not printed, carved by hand with precision. Claire frowned and turned it in her fingers. The weight of it felt deliberate. Then she saw the tiny engraving on the key ring itself: M. Henley, Custodial. Her breath caught. Martin Henley. Even the name felt like a ghost. 17 years ago, in 1981, Martin Henley had vanished without a trace. He was the school's night janitor. Quiet, punctual kind. Not many remembered him well now, just a few older staff and maybe some long-graduated students. But Claire did. She'd grown up in this town. Her brother had been in 9th grade when it happened. He remembered the chaos, the rumors. The story had always felt like urban legend. Some said he ran away with a student's mother. Others whispered darker tales that he'd uncovered something, that he'd gone too deep into the school's underbelly, whatever that meant. And then there were the ghost stories. The janitor of Brookstone, they'd call him. Allegedly, you could hear his keys jangling at night when you walked the halls alone. Claire never believed any of it. She was a substitute teacher now, temporarily assigned to Brookstone for the summer. She had a degree in education and a side passion in local history, but the Henley mystery always stuck with her. Not because of the legend, but because of how quickly people moved on. There had never been a real search, no statewide investigation. Just a note in the town paper that he didn't show up to work, and 2 weeks later a new janitor quietly took his place. She knelt beside the locker and lifted the entire key ring into her hands. Beneath it, the floor was stained a dark, irregular patch against the otherwise gray linoleum. She wasn't sure if it was water or rust or something else. Claire turned to glance around the hallway. Silent, dusty, still. Her fingers closed around the crescent-marked key again. She felt the chill travel up her arm. Taped to the back of the locker, half concealed beneath a curled math worksheet, was a folded square of old yellowed paper. Carefully, she peeled it away. The tape cracked and fell apart at her touch. She opened the paper. It was a hand-drawn sketch, obviously old. Not a student's doodle, a map. Crude but detailed. It showed a portion of the school, specifically the west hallway, then continued past it into an area that didn't make sense. There were marks, an X, some arrows, and next to a rectangular shape at the bottom of the drawing, a label 317 X voice plus crawl space. "What the hell is this?" she muttered. She refolded the paper quickly and stuffed it into her tote bag, along with the keyring. Footsteps echoed behind her. She spun around, heart-lurching. It was Principal Harrow, tall, aging, tightly wound in khakis and a Brookstone-branded polo. "I told you this wing was off-limits," he said flatly. "Sorry," Claire said, trying to keep her voice steady. "One of the lockers fell open. I came to check it out." He looked past her to the broken metal frame, then narrowed his eyes. "That locker hasn't been assigned since." He stopped. Claire said nothing. "I'll send maintenance to deal with it," Harrow continued. "But don't wander off again, Ms. Densley. Summer work means liability." "Understood." He turned to leave, but paused. "You didn't take anything out of it, did you?" Claire shook her head. "Just some trash I was going to throw out." "Good," he said, then left without another word. Claire waited until his footsteps disappeared completely. Then she sat down on the floor and pulled the map out again. That night, Claire sat on her apartment floor, the key ring spread out before her on a towel. She'd scrubbed the worst of the rust off, but the keys still felt ancient. Some might not even work anymore. She laid them out by size and symbol. 5 had numbers, 3 had colored dots, and then there was the crescent moon key. She examined the engraved ring again. M. Henley, custodial. Was it possible this locker had been his? Claire opened her laptop and began searching the school archives. Fortunately, as a substitute, she had limited staff login access. She entered the staff ID portal and typed Henley into the employment records. Nothing. She tried Janitor 1981. A single PDF popped up, a scanned personnel record. Martin Henley. Hired 1975. No photo. Last attendance, April 3, 1981. The following line read, "Status disappeared, no contact case, referred to local authorities." And then closed June 1, 1981. No further investigation. That was it. 3 lines. No follow-up, no public statement, no file. Claire leaned back and stared at the ceiling. A man vanishes in a public school building, and this was all that remained. She looked back at the key ring. The crescent moon key seemed to shimmer under the desk lamp. She picked it up and flipped it over again. That symbol wasn't random. Someone carved it deliberately, like a mark or a warning. Her eyes returned to the map. Room 317. She knew that room. It had been sealed for years. Officially, it was damaged in a fire during the 1981 spring semester and never repaired. But even as a student, Claire remembered that no one ever talked about that room. If you asked, they changed the subject. Even the janitors refused to mop near it. A chill ran through her spine. She laid the map flat beside the key and whispered to herself. Martin Henley didn't disappear. He left clues, and she was going to follow them. The service hallway smelled like old paper and rust. Claire stepped over a tangle of wires and ducked under a low-hanging pipe, the flashlight beam shaking in her hand. The crescent-marked key had worked surprisingly easily on a faded door behind the maintenance closet. No cameras, no alarm. Just a silent, dusty hallway she didn't know existed until yesterday. She aimed her light at the concrete walls, catching glimpses of peeling paint and a strange dampness crawling up from the floor. The hallway seemed to twist, even though the school above was straight. And worse, something about the air felt too quiet, like sound itself was being swallowed. She whispered aloud, just to test, "Hello." Her voice didn't echo. Claire swallowed hard and kept walking. About 20 feet in, she passed an open closet. Inside, a few broken brooms, a mop head with yellowed strands, and oddly an old fire alarm panel with all its wires snipped. She took a picture with her phone, then moved deeper. The corridor ended at another metal door. This one was dented, no sign, no handle. But the key ring had another key one labeled, in smudged ink, B. Elville, Storage. She tried it. Click. The door creaked open into a small chamber lined with metal lockers. No numbers, just blank doors and dust. And then movement. Claire froze. A figure stood at the far end, flashlight in hand, aimed at her face. "Hey," the voice barked. "What the hell are you doing down here?" Claire shielded her eyes. "Wait, Ricky." The flashlight lowered. It was Ricky Molina, the school's night security guard. Early 40s, stubble-lined jaw, and a permanent look of "I've seen too much." He used to be a student here. Now he patrolled it at night, mostly watching the cameras and smoking behind the gym. "Claire," he said, "are you seriously down here? Alone?" She raised both hands. "I know it's weird. Just don't freak out. I found something." He eyed her cautiously, then stepped closer. "This wing's locked for a reason. You shouldn't be messing around in here." "I found Henley's key ring," she blurted. "Martin Henley. From 1981. His face changed. Not shocked, not surprised. More like confirmation. "You know who I'm talking about," she said, watching him. Ricky didn't respond for a moment. Then he nodded once. "I was a freshman when he disappeared," he said slowly. "My locker was right outside room 317. I remember the day they shut it down. You remember him?" He nodded again. Quiet guy. Always wore this army green jacket. Kept to himself. What happened to him? Ricky hesitated. Then he said, "He didn't disappear." Claire frowned. "What do you mean he was erased?" Ricky led her into the locker-lined chamber and pulled out a stool from beneath an overturned mop bucket. Claire sat. He leaned against the wall and rubbed his eyes. "They said he walked out one night and never came back." Ricky began. "But I remember hearing a fight, like yelling, metal banging. It was late. Lights were flickering. I thought it was just a teacher dealing with students. But the next day, room 317 was taped off. And 2 days after that, all his stuff was gone. Gone. Like someone scrubbed him out of the school. His closet was emptied. His name was blacked out of the staff list. We were told he retired and moved to Arizona." Claire showed him the key ring. Ricky stared at it like it might burn through the towel she'd wrapped it in. "That's his," he said. "No doubt." She pulled out the hand-drawn map and unfolded it. Ricky leaned closer. "I've never seen that before, but I know this hallway." He tapped the paper. "This part, the square with 317 X voice plus crawl space, that's real. There's a duct behind room 317, big enough to crawl through." Claire pointed to a symbol at the edge of the drawing. "Do you know what this is?" Ricky shook his head. "Looks familiar. Might be some kind of maintenance marker, but that's not standard. I think he was trying to leave clues," she said. "Warnings. Maybe about the school." Ricky sighed. "Look, I get it. You're trying to uncover some buried truth, but you should let it go." "Why?" He looked her dead in the eye. "Because the last person who tried ended up in a psychiatric ward. That was Eli Greaves. He was obsessed with Henley. Thought the school was covering something up. He vanished a week after Henley. No one talks about him either." Claire's blood ran cold. "Eli. He was a student, right?" Ricky nodded. "Smart kid, a little intense. People said he had episodes. But I think he knew something, and I think he got too close. Why hasn't anyone done anything?" Ricky looked away. "This town doesn't want the truth. Brookstone High is where mayors went to school. Where real estate deals get made. You start digging and people start pushing back." Claire stood pacing. "So what? We all just accept that a janitor vanished and a kid went missing, and that's that, I'm saying. Be careful," Ricky said. "Don't get buried with them." But Claire couldn't stop. Later that night she returned to her apartment and laid everything out: the map, the keys, the photo of the cut fire panel, her notes on room 317, and now Eli Greaves. She opened her laptop and searched archived yearbooks. Brookstone High, class of 1981. She flipped through digital scans, scanning faces, names. There he was, Eli Greaves. Third row. Sharp jawline, heavy-lidded eyes, a nervous smile. A note beneath his photo read, Science Club President, Chess State Finalist. She moved to the next page. Something strange. A class photo of the Science Club, everyone labeled, except for one figure whose face had been scratched out. And beneath Eli G., she zoomed in. The scratch marks weren't digital. Someone had physically altered the yearbook before it was scanned. She clicked to the next entry. It was blank. Her hands trembled slightly as she jotted down his name again, circled it. Then she returned to the key ring. Her eye caught the crescent moon key again, still sharp, still cold. But this time she noticed something she hadn't before, tiny etching on the side of the handle. 317 V. Claire stared. Room 317. V for ventilation. Her breath hitched. Henley was trying to leave instructions. The next day, Claire visited the maintenance records room at the school under the pretense of reviewing old utility invoices for the renovation team. It was a tiny space near the boiler room lined with dusty boxes. She pulled the folders from 1980 to 1981 and spread them out. Two caught her attention. 1. March 28, 1981. Report of strange noises in room 317, vent. 2. April 2, 1981. Unauthorized access to maintenance crawl space. Janitor reprimanded. Claire's heart pounded. She flipped to the final entry. April 3, 1981. Staff report. Martin Henley did not report to shift. No calls. Locker cleared. That was the day he disappeared. And the next day, nothing. Just blank pages. Silence. She left the room shaking and walked to the edge of the west wing. The hallway outside room 317 was still boarded up. A fire warning sign still clung to the door. Claire placed her hand on the cold metal and whispered, "What happened in here?" Behind her, she heard the soft scuff of shoes. She turned. No one. But far off, just for a second, she swore she heard something faint. A high, whispery rattle. Keys. The key slid into the lock more smoothly than it had any right to. Claire's hand trembled as she turned it. A soft click echoed down the hall, muffled by the thick layer of dust and silence that had coated the west wing for nearly 2 decades. Her flashlight beam bounced off the plaque above the door. Room 317, closed since April 1981. The crescent-marked key, 317V, had matched. Whether that was fate obsession or both, Claire didn't care anymore. She pushed the door open. It groaned like something waking from a long sleep. Inside, the air was thick sour, with mildew-burnt plastic, and something metallic like dried blood. Her flashlight cut through the black, revealing charred walls and melted floor tiles. The fire that supposedly damaged this room had clearly been intense, but only in isolated areas. A burned desk here, a half-melted overhead projector there. Oddly selective. Too selective. Claire stepped in slowly. The room was a frozen time capsule of 1981. Student desks were still arranged in neat rows, though many were blackened. One chair had been completely incinerated, nothing left but 4 fused metal legs. Another desk in the back corner had been pulled away from the others facing the wall. Her heart thudded in her chest. Something was off. She panned her flashlight toward the ceiling. There, just above the back wall, a metal ventilation grate, slightly ajar. Voice plus crawl space, she whispered, repeating the words from Henley's map. Her breath condensed in the cold. Claire crossed to the back of the room and gently pushed the desk aside. Beneath it, the floor tiles were cracked. A patch had clearly been lifted at some point and clumsily replaced different color, a slight raise. She knelt. Under the desk was a floor tile marked in faint chalk, a crescent moon. Same symbol as the key. Her pulse quickened. She pried at the edges. It gave way with a loud pop, revealing a shallow compartment beneath. Inside, a small metal film canister rusted at the edges. Beside it, an old-school cassette tape sealed in a cracked plastic case. Faded Sharpie handwriting across the top, "Do not play." She lifted the tape carefully, heart racing. Beneath it was a Polaroid photo, water-stained and nearly ruined. It showed a desk, this desk. Sitting at it was a teenage boy, eyes shadowed. Claire could barely make out the shape of the pendant around his neck, a crescent moon. Eli Greaves. Claire sat on the floor of room 317, legs folded the tape in her hands. "Don't play it," it said. She played it. The audio hissed like a snake in her earphones for a few seconds before a voice emerged, male, middle-aged, shaky, scared. "If you're hearing this, I didn't make it out." Claire froze. It was Henley. She was sure of it. "They told me I'd be safe if I stopped asking questions." But I couldn't. Not after Eli showed me what he found. The tunnel's real. The symbols, they're not graffiti. They mark something older, something beneath the school. A pause. We thought the fire would stop them, but it didn't. The principal, Harrow, wasn't in charge back then. It was Callister. But they're all connected. They knew. That's why Eli's gone, and I'm next. Claire's throat tightened. Another pause on the tape, followed by a scraping sound like something being dragged. Then Henley's voice again. "If you find this, don't go alone. Don't trust anyone in a suit. And whatever you do, don't follow the vent line to the gym. That's where they hear you." Then static. Then silence. Claire pulled the headphones off and sat in stunned silence. This wasn't just paranoia. It was documentation. Henley had been trying to preserve something, to leave breadcrumbs. And now she was holding one of them. She grabbed her phone and quickly snapped photos of the Polaroid, the map again, and the cassette. She had evidence. And now she had a name, Principal Callister. The man before Harrow. Another shadow in the long hallway of secrets. She turned toward the vent above the wall. The cover hung slightly open. There was something tucked behind it. Papers. Maybe Claire stood on the melted desk and reached up. As she pulled the vent open wider, a folder fell out, yellowed, stained, but sealed in plastic. She caught it before it hit the floor. On the front, "Confidential. File 317. Greaves. Henley." Her breath caught. She unzipped the seal. Inside, a typed report. "Brookstone High. Internal investigation date, March 25, 1981. Subject S. Eli Greaves. Student Martin Henley. Custodian findings. Eli Greaves has accessed restricted maintenance crawl spaces using unauthorized keys. Martin Henley has encouraged such behavior and has been seen entering the lower-level storage beneath the west wing after hours. Unofficial diagrams were found in both parties' lockers. Discussions around symbolic rituals, substructures beneath the gymnasium, and claims of hearing voices from the vents have been noted. Recommended action: monitor. Remove access to basement-level keys. Prepare for possible psychiatric referral. Greaves." Final note: do not escalate to district board. Resolve internally. Claire stared at the report, numb. They knew. The administration had known everything: Henley's concerns, Eli's discoveries, even the vent noises. And they buried it. She folded the file and stuffed it into her bag. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered just once and went dark. Claire's flashlight buzzed, then steadied. Something thumped outside the room. She held her breath. Another sound. Not footsteps, metal. Like something dragging along the lockers. She crept to the door and cracked it open. The hallway was empty, but in the distance, through the stillness, she heard it again, a jangling, a sound she now knew too well. Keys. Back in her apartment that night, Claire laid everything out across her kitchen table. The vent file, the cassette, the Polaroid of Eli, Henley's keyring, the map, the scratched-out photo from the yearbook. She added sticky notes to each. Drew connections, circled names: Callister Harrow Caldwell, Henry Caldwell, the current mayor. He'd been in the class of 1981. He'd been a student during Henley's disappearance, possibly in the same class as Eli Greaves. She searched the yearbook again, found Caldwell, captain of the football team, member of the debate club, and, disturbingly, photographed standing in front of room 317. She zoomed in, on his wrist. A key ring, just like Henley's. Claire didn't sleep that night. Something big had happened in that school, and the wrong people had erased it. But they'd made a mistake. They hadn't erased everything. She had the evidence now, but more importantly, she had names. Real people who might still remember, still know. And she knew who she'd start with. She scribbled on her notepad, Lorraine Tully, retired teacher, English Dep. Still in town, she needed to ask about Eli, about room 317, about why the school had buried 2 people without a single grave. As she closed the file folder and shut off the lamp, she whispered to herself a promise more than a prayer. I won't let them disappear you. The library smelled like old glue lemon cleaner and silence. Claire had forgotten how eerie a public building could feel in the morning before the world fully woke. She was alone at the Brookstone Public Archives room, seated between 2 flickering desk lamps, surrounded by microfilm readers, dusty card catalogs, and forgotten stories waiting to be reread. She pulled the 1981 Brookstone High yearbook from its gray archival box, her latex-gloved hands trembling slightly. The last time she had opened this yearbook was on her laptop screen. This time she was holding the real thing. Physical. Torn. Touched by time. She flipped carefully to the senior section. There he was. Eli Greaves. Sharp-featured brown eyes and a half-smile, like he was about to say something sarcastic. His quote read, "Truth only hurts those who lie." Claire whispered the quote aloud, then glanced down at the next page. She hadn't noticed it before. Someone had scratched out a second student's name with a knife. The photo was completely obliterated, torn straight through the paper. The caption was blacked out in marker. But what made her blood freeze wasn't the defacement, it was the position. The missing student was directly to Eli's left. Their shoulders had been touching. Who had been erased? She flipped back to the table of contents and cross-checked names. There was a gap between Greaves Eli and Hanson Lily. A student named Granger Caleb should have been there. She scribbled the name down in her notebook and circled it. Then she turned to the science club photo again. In it, Eli stood to the far right. And again, next to him, another scratched-out figure. But in this one, the hand was still visible, holding a small object, a key. Claire closed the book and turned to the microfilm machine. The Brookstone Gazette archives were extensive. She loaded the April 1981 roll and scrolled carefully, eyes scanning headlines. School district approves budget hike. Local storefront vandalized. And then local janitor fails to appear for shift. Family concerned. It was a tiny article buried beneath an ad for vacuum repair. Martin Henley, 43. Has not been seen since Friday evening, April 3rd. Henley. A custodian at Brookstone High School for 6 years was scheduled for the night shift, but failed to arrive. Principal Thomas Callister confirmed that Henley had no prior incidents of absenteeism and was considered dependable. Police have opened a missing person report, but suspect no foul play at this time. Anyone with information is asked to contact the sheriff's department. That was it. Claire leaned back in her chair. No photos, no follow-ups, no mention of room 317, no connection to Eli Greaves, whose own disappearance hadn't even made the paper. She fast-forwarded 2 weeks. Still nothing. It was like both of them had been erased, not just from the school, but from history. Claire pulled her notebook close and flipped to her lead from the night before. Lorraine Tully, retired, English teacher, taught at Brookstone from 1966 to 1989. A quick call to the school's HR office confirmed she was still living in town, now 83, and residing at the Sun Haven Retirement Center just 10 minutes away. Claire drove over that afternoon. The center was a modest facility nestled between 2 empty wheat fields, its front garden lined with bird feeders and wind chimes. Inside, a nurse led her to the common area, where an elderly woman sat in a pale blue cardigan, reading Pride and Prejudice with a magnifying glass. Ms. Tully. The woman looked up. Yes, Claire smiled warmly. My name is Claire Densley. I'm a substitute teacher at Brookstone, and I'm doing some historical research on the class of 1981. I was hoping you might remember a student named Eli Greaves. Lorraine blinked slowly. Eli. She set the book down. My goodness, that's a name I haven't heard in years. Do you remember him? Of course. Brilliant mind. Loved poetry. Had a bit of a haunted look, you know, like he was always working out a riddle no one else could see. Claire pulled out a copy of the yearbook page. Do you know who was next to him in this photo? Lorraine squinted. That was Caleb Granger. They were close, but Caleb transferred mid-semester. That's what they told us anyway. Claire paused. Did you believe that Lorraine sighed? After Eli disappeared, I didn't know what to believe. First Henley, then Eli, and then one day Caleb was just gone. His locker cleaned out. No transfer papers. Nothing. Did you ask questions? Oh, I did, Lorraine said with a bitter laugh. And I was politely asked to focus on teaching literature. That's when I knew something was wrong. Claire leaned in. Do you remember anything about room 317? Lorraine's face changed. Her hands twitched slightly on the table. They said there was a fire, but the damage was minimal. I saw it before they sealed the door. Just scorch marks. No evidence of an electrical fault. Did you ever hear voices in the vents? Lorraine looked at her for a long moment. You've been in that room, haven't you? Claire nodded slowly. Lorraine reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a tiny folded paper. I never told anyone this, she whispered. But Eli gave me this on his last day. Said if anything happened to him, someone might need it. Claire unfolded the paper. It was a list. 5 names. 1. M. Henley. 2. E. Greaves. 3. C. Granger. 4. T. Callister. 5. H. Caldwell. At the bottom, one line scrawled in red ink. They meet below. Claire left the center with her mind racing. Callister the principal, Caldwell the current mayor. They were both on the list. And Caleb Granger, the missing student no one ever filed a report on. She returned home and laid the paper next to her growing evidence board. Then she searched Brookstone town records for Caleb Granger. Nothing. Then she searched national school transfer records for 1981. Finally, one hit transfer request Caleb Granger. East Vermont Boarding School, filed April 7, 1981. Claire called the registrar. Yes, the woman on the line said. We have a record of that request, but the student never arrived. No transcripts, no follow-up, just a request, and silence. Claire's blood went cold. 3 names, 3 disappearances, 1 school, and only 2 people left from that list still in public life. The next morning, Claire stood on the courthouse steps downtown. Mayor Henry Caldwell was hosting a press conference about the school's upcoming renovation grant. She stood at the edge of the crowd watching the man speak. Still tall, well-kept gray hair, polished voice. No signs of guilt, no cracks in his confidence. A polished politician. "Brookstone High has always been a cornerstone of this community," he said, "and this renovation ensures our future while preserving our past." Claire's hands curled around the paper in her pocket. Preserving the past. He had no idea she'd already unearthed it. Or maybe he did. As the crowd dispersed, Mayor Caldwell turned slightly. Their eyes met for just a second, and Claire could swear he recognized her. That night, Claire dreamed of keys. They jangled behind her as she ran down a dark hallway. Locker doors slammed shut on their own. The map twisted in her hands, the lines moving like worms. A voice whispered through the vents, repeating one name. Greaves, Greaves, Greaves. She woke up gasping, and she knew what she had to do next. If the truth had been buried, someone had buried it deliberately. It was time to meet the last person who might know what had really happened to Eli. Sarah Greaves. Claire parked her car on the shoulder of an unmarked road, tires crunching on gravel wind, tugging gently at the overgrown grass. Ahead of her stood a weather-worn trailer, nestled under the shade of a half-dead oak tree, its limbs twisted like reaching fingers. The mailbox still read Greaves, rusty, faded, untouched. Claire stepped out, clutching a manila folder packed with printouts, photos, and the hand-drawn map. Her boots sank slightly into the muddy ground as she walked toward the front porch. A wind chime above the door let out a single dull note. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again. This time she heard shuffling, slow, hesitant. The door creaked open a few inches, revealing a sliver of a face behind a security chain. "Who are you?" the woman rasped. Her voice was dry, unused. "My name is Claire Densley," she said gently. "I'm a teacher. I think you're Sarah Greaves." The woman didn't respond. Claire held up the folder. "I'm looking for the truth about your brother." The door shut. Claire exhaled. Maybe that was it. Then, after a moment, the sound of a chain sliding loose. The door opened fully. Sarah Greaves stood before her in a threadbare cardigan, gray hair, tied back, eyes sharp, despite the wrinkles webbing her face. She looked like someone who had survived too much and trusted too little. "You've got 10 minutes," she said, and turned inside. Claire followed. The trailer's interior smelled like burnt coffee and mothballs. The blinds were drawn, casting the space in amber gloom. A stack of old newspapers lay on the table beside a box of cassette tapes. No television, no computer, just dust and silence. Claire sat on a wooden chair while Sarah lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. "My brother's been dead for 17 years, Sarah said without preamble. "You think you're the first to come knocking? I don't think he just disappeared," Claire said. "And I don't think you do either." Sarah didn't argue, just took a long drag. "I found a key ring," Claire continued. "It belonged to Martin Henley. I also found a map Eli left behind. It led me to room 317. At that, Sarah's eyes narrowed. "You went in there?" Claire nodded. "I found one of Henley's tapes. He mentioned Eli, said the school was built on something deeper." Sarah exhaled smoke through her nose. "I told him to stop," she whispered. "I begged him." Claire leaned forward. "You knew what he was doing." Sarah stared at the wall. Eli started drawing symbols. Circles, crescents, runes. He said they were carved into the school foundation. He found a tunnel entrance behind the AV room. He thought it was ancient. Claire opened her folder and slid the map across the table. This, Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she touched it. He drew this the week before he vanished. Claire pointed to a symbol marked on the map. Do you know what this means? Sarah nodded slowly. It's not a symbol. It's a location. That's where the tunnel starts, under the West Wing furnace room. Henley helped him find it. Claire felt her pulse surge. You knew about the tunnel. I didn't believe him at first, Sarah said, voice breaking. But one night he came home terrified. Said he'd heard chanting, saw lights coming from under the gym. Claire said nothing. He gave me something, Sarah continued. Told me if anything happened, I should destroy it. I didn't. She stood and crossed to a closet, then returned with a thin, dust-covered envelope. Inside was a blueprint, hand-drawn and folded multiple times. Claire unfolded it on the table. It was a diagram of the school, but not the one that hung in the office. This version showed 2 levels. One was labeled lower access, the other sub-basement, no maintenance clearance. Claire traced her finger along the lines. The tunnel ran from room 317 to the boiler chamber, then dipped down beneath the gymnasium into a rectangular area simply labeled chamber. I think he wanted to expose them, Sarah whispered. He said the administration knew that some students were chosen, watched, tracked. Claire looked up. What do you mean, watched? Sarah pulled her cardigan tighter. There were stories of after-school groups, boys from the football team, honor students, late meetings in the gym basement. Eli said it was something older than the school. Like a cult, Claire asked. I don't know, Sarah whispered. He said they wore masks. Claire left the trailer an hour later with the blueprint in hand and a sick feeling in her stomach. If this was true, then what she had uncovered wasn't just a mystery, it was a cover-up rooted in ritual. She drove back to her apartment, spreading the blueprint across her kitchen table and aligning it with Henley's map. They matched. Exactly. Symbols, paths, labels, all confirmed, at the center of both the gymnasium and a hidden chamber beneath it. She picked up her phone and called Ricky. Hey, she said, I need to get into the furnace room. That night they met outside the maintenance wing. Ricky was already waiting, flashlight in hand, eyebrows raised. Oh, see. You look like you've seen a ghost. I talked to Eli's sister, Claire said. He found a sub-basement. It's real. The blueprint is from his own hand. Ricky unlocked the door and led her into the boiler corridor. Funny thing, he muttered. Back in the 90s, we had a maintenance guy quit. Said he heard crying from the furnace room. Thought he was losing it. They reached the far wall. Claire knelt beside a grated vent panel near the floor and pushed. It popped open with a creak. A narrow crawl space extended behind it, tight but passable. Ricky shone his light down the shaft. Jesus! Carved into the concrete just inside the wall was a crescent symbol. Claire looked at him. I'm going in. The crawl space smelled like mold and iron. Claire inched forward, the flashlight strapped to her wrist, barely illuminating the stone ahead. Her clothes caught on rusty bolts. Dust choked the air. But after about 20 feet, the passage widened into a small chamber. And there, at the far wall, was a door. Steel, bolted, marked with a triangle above the handle, another symbol, another keyhole. Claire reached into her pocket and retrieved the triangle-marked key she had found inside Henley's jacket in room 317. She slid it in, turned, click. The door opened with a deep groan. She shone her light through and gasped. Inside was a concrete staircase descending into pitch black. The air was colder here, and still. Behind her, Ricky crawled in, panting. You found it? Claire just nodded, still staring into the dark. They descended. At the bottom was a rusted sign, Restricted Facility, Level B2, Audio Surveillance Storage. What the hell? Ricky whispered. They pushed the next door open. Inside was a long corridor lined with broken lockers, half-melted reel-to-reel machines, walls covered in peeling foam insulation, and on the far side, a coat rack. Hanging from it, a janitor's jacket. Claire stepped forward and gently touched it. In the pocket, another key. And a cassette. The label read, "Final if found, do not bury me." The stairs creaked under their feet as Claire and Ricky descended each step, swallowed by darkness. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, damp, unmoving, like the belly of something ancient and forgotten. Claire's flashlight illuminated walls lined with soot and rusted conduits, many split open like veins, long dried. The corridor ended at a pair of heavy iron doors slightly ajar. Faded letters spelled out Level B2. Archive restriction, staff only. Claire pushed one door slowly. It groaned open, revealing a long chamber bathed in stale silence. They stepped into the tunnel beneath the school. The room was enormous, far larger than either of them expected. Rows of reel-to-reel tape recorders sat abandoned on rusting metal tables. Shelves sagged under stacks of labeled audio cassettes. Some had dates, 1976, 1977, 1981. Others were labeled with student names. Most labels had been blacked out with thick marker strokes, but the ink had aged, revealing faded remnants beneath. Claire approached one labeled E. Greaves, 32981 interview. She held her breath as she turned to Ricky. They recorded students. Ricky nodded slowly, stunned. This isn't maintenance, it's surveillance. Claire swept her flashlight to the far wall. There behind a cracked mirror hung a tangle of old microphones wires and a faded school intercom speaker cut open, gutted. This place wasn't just under the school, she murmured. It was the school. Ricky moved to a side table. His light caught a laminated blueprint pinned to the wall under rusted tacks. It matched Claire's map tunnels, chambers, vents, all centered beneath the gymnasium. But here, a final room had a label they hadn't seen before. Chamber 0. Ricky ran a finger along the map. This one. Look. The tunnel splits. One path loops to room 317. The other ends here. Claire's gaze fixed on the far end of the hall, where another sealed door waited, painted over and bolted with an industrial lock. I think that's it. She reached into her jacket and pulled out the key she'd found in Henley's pocket, the one marked with a circle inside a triangle. It slid in perfectly. Beyond the door was a stairwell, steep and narrow, the walls narrowing as they descended. The air grew colder with every step. Claire's flashlight flickered as they reached the final platform. A metal door stood before them, painted black. In red letters across the front, barely visible now, "Do not open undocumented structure." D.H. Claire turned to Ricky. He exhaled. "We shouldn't do this. We already did." She pushed the door. It opened into a chamber, and nothing they imagined could have prepared them. The room was circular, carved directly into bedrock. The walls were lined with student desks, 12 of them each placed in a perfect ring. At the center was a low stone platform with scorched markings like fire had been lit again and again in that very spot. Around it, symbols were etched into the floor, crescents, triangles, spirals, eyes. Claire stepped forward slowly. "What is this?" Ricky's voice was hollow. "It's a ritual space." In the corner, leaning against the wall, was a figure. Human. Alive. Barely. Versailles. He was hunched, rail-thin beard tangled down to his chest. His overalls were shredded, his eyes glassy but alert. He blinked as the light hit him. Claire fell back. "Oh, my God!" The man tried to speak, but only a rasp escaped. Ricky knelt beside him. "Is that—" Claire stared. It was Martin Henley, still alive. They gave him water, wrapped him in a tarp. His fingers trembled violently as he held the cup. "I stayed," he whispered. "I stayed to keep Eli safe." Claire crouched beside him. "Where is he?" Henley didn't look up. gone. Ricky asked quietly, "Did they kill him?" Henley's eyes darted to the walls. "Not them, not in the way you mean." He pointed to the center of the room. "That platform. That's where they met. The Honors Club, the Mentorship Society. Names changed every year, but the same people, Callister, Caldwell, Coach Dunley. They used this place for control of what students? Promising ones. They wanted loyalty, obedience. And when Eli found this chamber, they couldn't let him leave." Claire's voice shook. "What happened to him?" Henley closed his eyes. He recorded them. What they did, the threats, the meetings. I helped him hide the tapes, but they caught us. Burned room 317 as a warning. They said if I took the blame, they'd let him go. And they didn't. Henley didn't answer. He didn't have to. Claire knelt and reached for his hand. "You did your best." He looked at her. "You're her, the one who found the map." She nodded. He gave a sad smile. Then maybe it wasn't for nothing. Claire helped Henley out of the chamber, her arms under his. Back in the archive tunnel, she found a large, sealed drawer, marked E. Greaves, deposit sealed by order of Principal Callister, inside a black plastic box. She opened it. A body, wrapped in a decayed Brookstone High uniform, curled into fetal position, holding a cassette labeled in red ink, "They Lied." Claire collapsed. It was Eli, and he had left the truth in his hands. They called the police that night. Henley was taken to the hospital. The chamber was sealed off again, this time by real crime scene tape. Claire gave them everything, the tapes, the files, the photos. And then she went home, sat in her silent kitchen, and wept. 3 days later the sheriff called. He was hesitant. "There's pressure," he admitted, "from upstairs. They want to spin this." Claire said nothing. "We can't prove who was involved. Too much time, too little evidence that sticks." "But you have a body," she said. "Yes," he admitted, "but they'll say it was an accident, a fall, a sealed room no one knew about." Claire stared at her corkboard. "I'm going public." Claire. She hung up and turned on her recorder. It was raining the morning Claire uploaded the recordings. A slow gray drizzle clung to Brookstone like a secret no longer willing to stay buried. She sat in her apartment laptop, open fingers trembling above the trackpad. The file names stared back at her like eyes. Henley final down, WAV, Greaves They Lied, dot. WAV. She uploaded them both to a cloud drive, then hit send on a mass email local journalists, national true crime bloggers, alumni networks, even a few senators' offices. Subject line, proof of cover-up beneath Brookstone High. Names inside. The truth at last was free. The next 48 hours blurred into static. Her phone rang endlessly. Press reporters, podcasters, trolls. Some called her a hero. Others accused her of faking everything. The local paper refused to print her story. The school board issued a generic statement about respecting the memory of all former students and staff. Mayor Caldwell remained silent, but the audio spoke louder than any of them. Henley's voice on the final tape was rough but steady. "This is my testimony, my confession, my plea. If you're hearing this, it means someone finally found what we left behind. The chamber is real. The meetings were real. They chose boys, smart ones, quiet ones, trained them, threatened them, groomed them. When Eli refused to join, they made him disappear. When I tried to stop it, they sealed me in. But I stayed. I stayed because if I left, there would be no one left who remembered his name. His name was Eli Greaves. Please don't let them bury him again." Claire played the second tape alone. It took her 2 days to gather the courage. She sat cross-legged in her living room blinds, drawn a single lamp lit. She slipped the cassette into an old tape deck she bought at a thrift store. then pressed play. Eli's voice was young, nervous. "Okay, March 30th, 1981. Eli Greaves recording from the tunnel beneath the gym. They think I don't know what's going on, but I've been watching. Henley helped me access the blueprints. There's a second chamber. They call it Chamber 0. Last week I followed them. Coach Dunley, Principal Callister. 2 of the seniors, Caldwell was one of them. They wore masks, animal heads. They had candles and books. I thought it was just some dumb frat stuff, but then I heard them say my name. They think I'm weak, that no one will believe me. So if you're listening to this, if they do something to me, please don't forget me." The tape hissed, then a sound, something heavy, a door slamming, then a voice not Eli's. Cold, authoritative. "He's down here. Lock the hatch." The tape stopped. Claire sat frozen. It was confirmation not just of what happened, but who was involved. She emailed the audio to a reporter from a mid-tier investigative site. Within 24 hours, it had gone viral. Secret Society at Brookstone. Shocking tape surface in cold case. Missing janitor and student linked to ritual chamber beneath school. Mayor Caldwell silent after former classmates' remains discovered. The town could no longer pretend. 3 days later, a press conference was announced. Claire stood at the back of the crowd in a long coat hood up. Mayor Henry Caldwell stepped up to the podium, flanked by 2 aides and a blank-faced police chief. He cleared his throat. "I want to first express my deep sorrow over the tragic discoveries made beneath Brookstone High. As a former student, I am shocked." Claire took a step forward, voice clear. "You were there." The crowd turned. Mayor Caldwell froze. "You were in the room," she said louder. "The tapes confirm it. The witness confirms it. Eli's dead. You helped cover it up." Gasps rippled. A reporter raised a mic. "Mayor, would you like to respond?" Caldwell stared at Claire. For a second something broke in his face, an old crack, too long plastered over. Then he turned and walked away from the podium. Refused to speak. Didn't deny it. Didn't have to. That night Claire visited the hospital. Henley was recovering slowly. He'd gained weight. His beard had been trimmed. His eyes still carried the weight of 17 years underground, but there was light behind them now. "They're investigating," Claire told him softly. He nodded. "Doesn't mean they'll pay for it. But people know." Henley looked at her with a quiet, tired smile. "That's all I ever wanted." Claire reached into her bag and placed a small velvet box in his hand. He opened it. Inside a student ID card, laminated, faded. Greaves Eli, age 17. Science Club president. "Found it in the chamber," she said. "Thought you should have it." Henley pressed the card to his chest and closed his eyes. A week later, Brookstone High reopened its west wing for the first time in 17 years. Principal Harrow was no longer there. In his place, an interim leader from outside the district. Room 317 remained sealed. Its door replaced with a brass plaque. In memory of Eli Greaves and Martin Henley. Truth endures. Students walked past it every day now. Some stopped to read. Some didn't, but none could ignore it anymore. Claire stood at the edge of the soccer field, watching the clouds shift over the school's rooftop. The earth still held secrets, but some of them had surfaced, and some at long last had been heard. She pulled out her notebook one last time and scribbled a single line. "They tried to bury the truth, but someone always comes looking." The morning sun rose pale and uncertain over Brookstone, casting long shadows across the town square. At the center, under a white canopy tent, folding chairs were arranged in rows facing a makeshift podium. There were no balloons, no student choirs, no politicians grinning for cameras. This wasn't a celebration. It was a memorial. Claire stood near the backhands in her coat pockets, watching the townspeople file in one by one, teachers, former students, a few reporters, scribbling notes. She spotted Sarah Greaves, seated near the front, her silver hair pulled back, a faded photo of Eli clutched in her lap. Across from her sat Martin Henley, gaunt but upright, eyes clear. He wore a navy windbreaker, the collar zipped high, his hand resting quietly on a cane. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence said everything. A plain wooden sign had been placed on the podium. In memory of those forgotten. A soft-spoken speaker from the district office began. We gather here today not because it is comfortable, but because it is right. Today we remember not just names, but truths once silenced. No mention of the tapes. No mention of the chamber. No mention of Mayor Caldwell, who had officially resigned the night before, citing health reasons. Claire watched silently, jaw tight. They were trying to wash it all clean, wrap the horror in soft language and move on. She understood why, but she wouldn't allow it. Not completely. Later that afternoon, after the tent had been dismantled and the crowd had drifted away, Claire walked back to Brookstone High's alone. She passed room 317. The new brass plaque shone in the light, in memory of Eli Greaves and Martin Henley. Truth endures. She stood there a moment, one hand resting against the door. It no longer felt like a locked vault. Now it felt like a gravestone. Back at home, Claire opened her laptop. The downloads hadn't stopped. Henley's and Eli's tapes had been shared across every major social platform. Podcast episodes analyzing them hit millions of streams. A documentary deal had already been pitched by 2 independent networks, and yet, amid the attention, something felt unfinished. She opened her email and found a message waiting in her inbox. Subject: I was there. Caleb. She clicked. Claire. My name is Caleb Granger. I was Eli's friend. You don't know me, but I saw what you did. I saw what you exposed. I still live under another name because back then I ran. I was in the tunnel with him once, just once. I saw the circle of desks. I heard the voices. I knew it was real, but I was afraid. I backed out. I let them take him. You gave him something I couldn't. You gave him back his name. I'm ready to talk. See. Claire's hand hovered over the reply button, then clicked. A week later, she met Caleb in a quiet corner of the State University Library 2 hours from Brookstone. He looked older than 35 gray at the temples. Nervous eyes, wearing a borrowed name like an old coat. But when he spoke of Eli, his voice softened. We were supposed to run away together, he said. We had a plan, after graduation. New names, new lives. But then he found the tunnel. Did you ever go in? He nodded. One time, just once, it was enough. What did you see? A ceremony, he whispered, a circle of chairs, men in masks. Some students we recognized, top of the class, full scholarships. They were chanting, not real words, sounded made up, but the way they said them. He trailed off. I got scared. I told Eli we had to stop. He didn't. And then he vanished. He looked up at Claire. I've been hiding ever since, watching names rise in politics and on school boards, wondering if anyone else knew. You're not alone anymore, she said. Caleb smiled sadly. I know. That night, Claire returned to Brookstone with one final task. She walked through the West Wing quietly. The lights were still dim, dust still clung to the corners. But now every echo of her footsteps was met with memory, not mystery. She entered room 317. It had been unsealed for her just once more. The desks remained burned and broken. The vent grate still hung crooked. But now a light breeze moved through the room. Claire walked to the back wall and knelt. Beneath the chalkboard where Eli had once hidden his drawings, she found a hollow pocket in the wall. She slipped a small object inside, a copy of Eli's student ID, a page from his notebook, a handwritten note from Sarah. Then she slid a folded sheet of paper in after it. On it, her own words. To the next person who finds this. If you're here, it means something still isn't right. This school holds memories that refuse to rest. But the truth lives in those who listen. Please listen. Claire Densley. She sealed the pocket, stood, and walked out, leaving the room dark once more. Months passed. The school year ended. Henley moved into a care facility just outside of town where Claire visited every Sunday. They played chess. Sometimes he talked, sometimes he didn't, but he smiled more now. Sarah Greaves planted a tree in her front yard. A memorial stone sat at its base. Eli. You were never lost to me. Caleb testified anonymously before the state board. A quiet investigation was opened. It would never see court, but records were seized, names quietly removed from posts of power, retirements announced, scholarships redirected, small justice. But real Claire published a book, The Chamber Below, a true account of what Brookstone buried. It hit the bestseller list in 3 weeks, but more importantly, it gave people names, stories, truths, and names cannot be erased once enough people are willing to remember them. On the first anniversary of Eli's discovery, Claire returned to room 317. The plaque remained. This time someone had left flowers beneath it. A single note attached. Heard the tape. I believe you now. An 81 graduate. Claire smiled, closed her eyes, and stood in the silence. No more ghosts here, just memory. And maybe, finally, peace.